Danny Haifeng is a social activist, writer, and political analyst whose work has appeared in such publications as Mint Press News, Counterpunch, and the American Herald Tribune for the last 5 years. He has also been a weekly contributor to the Black Agenda Report. Please welcome Danny Haifeng. Hi, Danny. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
So now something horrible happened to you. You tweeted this out, right? Now, your specialty is China, and we've had you on the show to talk about China in the past. And this is from your just your Substack? Is that what this is, or is this your Medium?
No, this is just a screenshot of the tweet because, Twitter forced me to delete it just for my countdown.
Oh, really?
But we can get to that.
So here's the tweet
to a thread.
You said you tweeted this out. Every June 4th, Western propagandists remind us of the Tiananmen Square massacre to smear China. The truth? No massacre occurred on the square, and the violence that took place Beijing during the time was part of a failed color revolution backed by the United States. Now, you tweeted that out, and they then did this to you. They said you violated their rules against abuse and harassment. You may not engage in targeted harassment of someone or incite other people to do so. So that doesn't make any sense. I thought they were going to say that you were denying a mass like murder or something, which they don't allow you to do on YouTube, I know. But that doesn't make sense, right, Danny?
No, I mean, I guess there were many Western propagandists who were triggered because it's obvious that
it got reported.
That's the only thing in that tweet that could be targeted as such, as inciting harassment.
By the way, that when Jackson was on, that was the other thing I told you, that we played that. I guess you're going to show that ad, and I missed it. Jackson, I can't believe they put that part, and I was so blown away that was the thing. I didn't know since I was a kid. I assumed. Well, are you about to show the video?
No, I don't have that. But I don't know what video you're talking about.
It was a Go Army to join the information warriors, I guess.
Oh, I didn't see it. No, and
it's the most disturbing thing. I mean, I don't even know why they made it. But basically, they're showing how they do information warfare, and you could be part of it, like to join the army. And they show the tank going around the guy instead of running him over, which I guess had been cut out all the years I ever heard of it.
Oh, no
so
kidding!
They're bragging about it in the commercial. This is what we do. Like in the commercial, you know how crazy that is?
So they put the Tiananmen Square thing with the tank and the guy in their propaganda video to show you this is the kind of
stuff that you could be a part of doing. Yes. Okay.
Oh, no kidding. By the way,
it took me a minute to understand what he was telling me because that was so mind-blowing to me that was even on video.
I met that guy.
The actual guy?
The guy who got his legs cut off, they said a tank ran him over.
Yeah.
I met that guy at the Oslo Freedom Forum. I interviewed him. I have that on video somewhere.
What did he say?
I interviewed a bunch of people like that, and then after I figured out what the Oslo Freedom Forum was, which was just a shield for imperialism, I didn't air any of those interviews. I didn't want anything to do with them. And so, because they were using those people to further imperialism. And they would find victims, and then they would say, oh, look, we need to go bomb Yemen more, and stuff like that. And that's what the Oslo Freedom Forum, and that's who's that, the chess guy?
Gary Kasparov.
Gary Kasparov. Yeah, he's an imperialist. Okay, so you go on to say, 3 years prior to the Tiananmen incident, George Soros had started an NGO, that stands for non-governmental organization, that had influence in Beijing called the Fund for Reform and Opening of China. Key protest leaders and rioters were supported by Soros' org, and it was promptly closed following the unrest. So you're saying, Danny, that George Soros, with a lot of these things, like in Syria, people tried to pretend that it was the Arab Spring that led to this overthrow of Assad or this uprising that wanted to overthrow him. It wasn't. It was CIA called Timber Sycamore. They flooded billions of dollars into terrorists to go try to overthrow that guy. So now you're saying that George Soros was doing a similar thing. He was funding the people to go do protests in Tiananmen Square?
Yeah, so essentially, this was part, as you said, this is part of an overall color revolution, similar to what we're seeing in the modern era, right? Post-Cold War.
What is a color revolution? Tell people what the color revolution is.
So a color revolution is a Western-backed, generally the U.S., because they really took off during the period at the fall of the Soviet Union, 1980s, into the current period. Over the last 40 years, there's been a lot of investment from U.S. NGOs primarily, because the U.S. is the big hegemon, but they have all the Western allies, the UK, all the Western countries that kind of do the bidding of the United States on their side, and they essentially fund these NGOs. For example, the National Endowment for Democracy is one of the bigger ones, right? That funds quote unquote civil society groups, organizations,
Bellingcat.
media, exactly, Bellingcat.
Fake media organizations that are just mouthpieces for the intelligence community.
And they did it in China. There was something called the Chinese Intellectual, which the NED funded at a tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars beginning in the 1980s to first spread to Chinese immigrants in the United States, professionals, those kind of folks. Then they switched in 1988, a year before the protests began, or before they really jumped off. They switched and started to spread the Chinese intellectual around China in order to infiltrate the universities and make them kind of hotbeds of unrest. And that's exactly kind of how the Tiananmen Square.
And so that's how you foment, that's how you create a natural uprising, right? And so they've been doing that. They did the same thing in Taiwan, right? What am I? Yeah,
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
I'm sorry.
Hong Kong, and there's a lot of U.S. influence in Taiwan too.
No, I didn't mean. Yeah, I meant. Yeah, I got that mixed up.
Why is it called a color revolution?
It's called the Color Revolution because oftentimes, I mean, there's a gentleman, Gene Sharp, who went to a program. He's an academic. He's known as kind of like a nonviolent protest guru. He went to a program that's known as the CIA at Harvard, the Harvard International School, and he was trained by someone at the Rand Corporation, Thomas Meshinger, who came up with sort of a manual. They came up with a manual that showed how to generate nonviolent protests abroad in order to get regime change, right? To battle authoritarianism. And he actually was in China beginning, in 1989, right before the protests began. And he was actually monitoring the protests. There's some suspicion that he was involved. But nonetheless, the Color Revolution is all about, it's kind of a code word for nonviolent protests for political ends. Generally, they turn violent because nonviolent protests don't usually cause regime change without some kind of chaos and spark and some kind of disorder that can really bring down a government. So Color Revolution is really just a kind of moniker for creating unrest abroad for political ends. That this is how they kind of co-opted the left in the 60s and 70s, right? They use the language of democracy. And so the Color Revolution, oftentimes even the protests themselves are named after a color. The Orange Revolution, for example, in Ukraine in 2004.
Right.
So the Color Revolution is really just a name to show that there's something rising, right? Democracy is rising.
So they branded it like McDonald's, like he's like the Ray Kroc that made McDonald's. This guy
yeah, Gene Sharp. He's very well. A lot of people on the left, even Howard Zinn, defended him upon close to his death, saying that he was someone who had a lot of principles and was on the left, but he actually was very deep in the national security state of the United States, helping CIA, helping these organizations do their work abroad.
So you go on to tell more of the story, and you say, while Western media has portrayed the event as a Chinese government massacre, journalists on the ground rejected that premise. Graham Earnshaw of Reuters saw no violence in the square and said at least half the deaths that occurred were Chinese cops and soldiers.
Yep.
Propaganda is vital to color revolutions. We hear of Tank Man. Oh, the Tank Man. That's the guy I met. Mm-hmm. Right? We hear
how did he lose his legs then?
We have Tank Man, but not that his actions occurred the day after June 4th or that he left the scene unscathed without any violence from Chinese authorities. This is confirmed in the video of the incident. I don't have that video. A WikiLeaks cable also corroborated that no violence occurred on Tiananmen Square on June 4th. The cable was from the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. It confirmed no violence occurred and that protesters freely came and left the square. Only the Telegraph has reported on the cable. Really? Since June 4th, 1989, China has accomplished major achievements: the elimination of extreme poverty, massive wage growth, and global leadership in high-tech public infrastructure development and renewable energy. But the West's pursuit of war and color revolution continues. Tank Man propaganda conceals images such as these, and there they are. Seems like they're having a good time together. The truth is, no major clashes between peaceful protesters and authorities occurred. The violence stemmed from rioters outside the square, and half the casualties were authorities facing down heavy arms. So there was violence there, right, Danny?
Yep, indeed there was. It happened the night of June 3rd into June 4th. And the violence, there's still a lot of misunderstanding, not a lot of understood about it, other than the fact that we know that there, yeah. Well,
all I ever heard of it was, oh, they ran this guy over with a tank. I couldn't believe it on the recruiting thing. It still blows my mind.
And that's the thing. There was violence, but a lot of it wasn't covered by Western journalists. The journalist, I think his name was James Weidenberg, he's not a journalist, he's a photographer who took the Tank Man photo. He was very angry that he couldn't stay at the square longer because he was so injured from a rioter who had hit him in the head with a rock the night before, about 5 kilometers away, where a lot of the violence was happening. And he was very worried that he wasn't going to get a Pulitzer because he didn't get enough material. But that sort of proves that there was violence happening. And one thing that you see from those photos that isn't often talked about is how Chinese soldiers, all the way up until the violence started 5 kilometers outside of Beijing and in other parts of the city, before that, Chinese soldiers, the PLA, were unarmed. And that's why there were so many cops and soldiers who died, because they were unarmed. They weren't ready to deal with riots. They were trying to negotiate with the protesters. And that's what happened for
the cops
6-7
don't have
weeks.
guns. The cops don't get any respect. The culture ministry you'd have to be afraid of, but the cops, like, people just give them the finger and drive by. It's wild out there.
In the Tank Man, this is very, very interesting, because the full video shows so blatantly that, he was standing in front of a tank, moving around the tank, gets on top of the tank, talks to the person in the tank, and then gets off, and then people in the neighborhood kind of whisk him away and say, okay, you should probably get out of the way now. But he doesn't, there's no violence, he's not arrested, he's not shot at. So the Tank Man narrative is so strong. It's such a black op kind of propaganda message to demonstrate violence, that the real violence that occurred that day has been so suppressed because there was involvement, right? There was Keller Revolution activity. There was funding coming in from the NED, from Soros' organization, from all sorts of sources. There was a CIA operation that allowed a lot of these forces to leave through Hong Kong into the United States. Chai Ling, who was one of the protest leaders, who called in an interview, in a secret interview with Western media, she called for the blood of Chinese people to be spilled in these protests in order to change the government, in order to overthrow the government. She was whisked away by Operation Yellowbird to the United States, and she ended up working at Bain Capital. I mean, this is sort of the involvement. This is some of the involvement that the United States had in the Tiananmen Square incident, that the actual violence that occurred there doesn't get talked about because it would point to very suspicious activity.
Well, Soros' name is crazy to hear pop up in that. Like, he's also so. Wow, this is really wild, man.
And so now you are banned from Twitter, or they'll let you back on if you delete this tweet. Is that it?
Yeah. So I put in an appeal, and I've been rejected for verification many times. I've had interactions with Twitter's. Whatever.
You can put Danny back
Twitter SIP, all of that. So I did an appeal, but I waited 24 hours and said they're not going to answer me in good time. So I deleted the tweet, and now I'm on a 7-day ban where I can't do anything but read or DM text followers. So I can't do anything on Twitter. Essentially, I can't, post. I can't I can't interact. So they banned me based on what they say is me committing harassment toward who knows what.
Who knows?
But it really is about the Tiananmen Square. It was trending, right? And it really is, I think, part of this larger Twitter campaign. Twitter collaborates with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute to delete any account that challenges the anti-China narrative, the new Cold War narrative. The Australia Strategic Policy Institute is funded by the Department of Defense, the Australian Department of Defense, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, all the major military contractors, and all the big tech corporations, Google, Amazon. And it has a partnership with Twitter to delete accounts considered state-linked disinformation operations, and they've deleted hundreds of thousands of accounts. And so there is a literal operation happening on Twitter, and it's not just Chinese accounts. It's accounts that challenge the anti-China narrative. It's accounts that challenge the war, the war and sanctions on Nicaragua, Venezuela, on and on and on. Russia and the Ukraine situation. It's an entire operation that Twitter has going, and it has led to the deletion of many accounts. And and I believe that my suspension has probably something to do with that.
The big red flag immediately is, since when would you get in trouble for saying something that like China likes? Like all the thing you always hear is like, Disney has to take the black guy out of the poster for China. Just the fact that you would be saying, hey, China didn't do it and that would be censored is already like something's up. I just got a question. Danny, when that in 89, because I remember as a kid, was that like after the wall fell and were they just like riding on a high of all these things collapsing and thought like, hey, maybe we can have China do it too?
Well, you are definitely onto something, because at this point, there was a lot happening. The Cold War was coming to a head. The Soviet Union had not fallen yet, but it had basically been opening up, and all of the foundations were being laid for the Soviet Union to fall and then turn capitalist. The same was happening in Eastern Europe. So as you said, Germany, the wall fell. And so the protests at Tiananmen Square, what's very interesting about them is they actually started out as first a gathering to mourn the death of a Communist Party leader, Hu Yaobang. And then they started as protests of student intellectuals for kind of like a purer socialism, right? Fight corruption, get rid of corruption in the party, allow us more opportunities. College entrance had actually just started again since the Cultural Revolution in China. So there was a lot of dissatisfaction among the students who saw the economic situation around the world and in China was worsening, right? There's higher inflation. This was a tough economic period in the world, and it was no different in China. So a lot of these students were looking for things. And then the color revolutionists, we could call them, backed by the United States, they were looking to take advantage of the situation. So you were definitely on point there. They're looking to take advantage of the situation and do what they hoped and what they, I think at this time, knew would succeed in the Soviet Union, which is its downfall. In China, they miscalculated greatly because their support did not lead to any such thing. And actually, it really did lead to China mistrusting the West, especially around politics, when it came to their sovereign affairs. The NED, George Soros's organization, those organizations were closed down, so they haven't had any in-person activity there ever since. And
dude, anybody that I know that's right wing, that was like, who's definitely like, I was never like China. I've been there. It looked like a weird funhouse mirror of us to me when I was there. But I've never heard anyone bring up that George Soros had something to do with that. Like, I've never heard anything like that before. I bet it'll blow a lot of people's minds. Because does that mean all this nonsense that everybody hates here now? Is that some kind of retaliation, or is that the actual government doing it to us to increase the sales of, I guess, Top Gun 2 tickets?
So come to me.
Back to Jimmy.
So here's that video. I don't know if this is the exact one. But here, so this is the one where this is the tank man, right? This is what you're talking about. And so there's all these tanks, and this guy goes and stands in front of it. See, there he comes. There he is. He's going to go stand in front of this tank. And let's put it on a little faster speed. And so now the tank tries to go around him, and then he tries to stop the tank, right? And he keeps trying to stop the tank. The tank keeps trying to go around him. And now, is the propaganda story, Danny, that the tank ran him over?
Well, what ended up happening was the photo of this video.
Oh, look, he's going to climb on
viral.
it. He's going to climb on it. He's climbing on the tank.
Dude, they cut it. I thought the tank ran him over for like my whole life. That's the one thing I knew about this event was a tank. For some reason, I remembered seeing a flattened guy on the street too. I don't know if I just added that in myself, but that's what I thought for this whole time until very recently.
So it was the pic. I remember that picture. So you're saying the picture was the one that went around the world that everybody saw.
Right. By the Western photographer, James Weidenberg. He was able to get that photo around, went viral, and it's been viral ever since, the photo. And part of the video is shown to many people, but not the whole video generally, because it shows that people kind of say, okay, people in the neighborhood, I mean, these are people on bikes, these are just people walking around. They say, okay, time to go, right? They're like, you should probably get out of the street.
They were on the tank side at this point.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's kind of odd to be out in public and you're like, okay, why?
Take your groceries and go, sir. Why do you have 2 bags of groceries doing this?
Exactly. It was kind of a strange event. And it was the day after the Tiananmen Square protests had already been dispersed, right? They had left. The vast majority left on their own accord. And the Tiananmen Square protest leaders said this. They left on their own accord after 2 weeks of martial law, quote unquote, where basically it was soldiers and protesters negotiating, hey, what do you want? How do we end this? And then after those 2 weeks, they dispersed. And then the violence, of course, that did happen, which has a lot of suspicious activity and possible definite U.S. involvement in it, that happened around the square. And so that's where the misconception is. A lot of people think that the violence happened at the square where there were thousands of protesters there, that it happened there and they were mowed down by tanks. There are photos that go around that are doctored, really, and they go around, they show that people were lying down on the streets. I've looked those photos up. I did photo searches, reverse image searches. A lot of them don't check out prior to 2016. Most of them, the original source of 2016.
Most of my knowledge of it, keep in mind, comes from the snippet in the Billy Joel video. We didn't start the fire.
That's right.
That's where most of my knowledge is. But what I remember in my head was, and now that I think about it, it's hilariously vague. Like, I guess a bunch of people said, we want democracy, and then they ran them over with a tank, and then they were like, all right, I guess we don't want it. That's the story
right.
that I had.
Exactly, yeah, and it was so simplified and made to be so basic. And what's so interesting about the Tank Man video, for me, is that I can't even imagine what would happen to protesters in the United States if they were to climb on tanks. There would definitely be violence. We even saw it.
They'll run you over with a cop car.
Exactly. In 2020, and the NYPD was mowing people down with cop cars just for being out there and protesting, right? They were just mowing people down. They were pushing old people. I know, Jimmy, you covered this. Pushing older men down on the street who were just walking and protesting, cracking their heads open. I mean, to imagine that happening in the United States would probably lead to death. But the whole narrative around Tank Man is to get the image in our head. So then we believe in a narrative which can serve U.S. geopolitical interests.
Like January 6th killed 7 people, and it's like all like middle-aged man, natural causes, and a suicide, and 1 cop shot. Like, there's a crazy, I mean, you can see the same technique over and over again.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Danny, I mean, it's good to hear you're going to get back on Twitter. It's bad to hear that they're still censoring the truth on Twitter, right? So I have to always remind people, they don't censor you for lying. They censor you for telling a truth. Just like Julian Assange is being, they're trying to kill him, torture him. They're doing that because he told the truth, not because he lied. Danny got suspended from Twitter not because he told a lie about the Chinese government, or because he told a lie about a massacre. He told the truth, and that's what you can't do. And who knows? I don't know. We'll see what happens on YouTube. We'll see, because they might say we're denying something, right? Which you're not allowed to do.
They didn't deny.
But we're not denying the violence. We're denying that who committed it. Right? That's the
I think that's why they're doing
violence.
it without saying. I think they don't want to have to get into that argument about if it happened, because I don't think it's just like, I think a lot of people just vaguely know about it, and it's not really hidden that much. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
it's only hidden by choosing not to think more about it ever since 1989.
So
exactly, and also you mentioned Julian Assange, Jimmy. They won't even report on his on WikiLeaks' leaks. The cable, the 2011 cable on the Tiananmen Square incident, the Western media won't even report on that.
I never heard of it till just now.
Me neither. I didn't hear about it until you talked about it, Danny. So yeah, I've never, and I follow WikiLeaks. All right, well, Danny, that's great to hear, and thanks for coming on. And everybody, check out Danny's work. Where should they find you, Danny?
Sure. So just a few places. I'm actually going to start moving my work on a Telegram, so you can follow me there at the Haiphong Press. Because regardless of whether Twitter allows me back on or not, they said 7 days minimum. They said it could take longer. So regardless, I think it's time, because I know that this isn't the first time I've been locked out. I got locked out one time before for 12 hours. You know, it's kind of building. So I figured move to Telegram. So follow me there at the Haiphong Press. You can follow me on Substack at chroniclesofhaiphong.substack.com. You can also follow a platform I run, socialistchina.org, Friends of Socialist China. We're having an event this Saturday on the war on multipolarity. So you definitely want to register for that there. Ben Norton, myself, and many others will be speaking on that. And then you can also find me at Black Agenda Report Weekly, The Left Lens on YouTube, which I host. And you can also follow me on Patreon at patreon.com/Danny Haiphong to support my work.
All right. Ben Norton, my favorite authoritarian maniac pro-mandate guy. That's fantastic. All right. So good to have you on, Danny. Good luck with your thing on Saturday, and everybody follow him at his places you can follow him. We'll see you soon. Here we're doing stand-up comedy in Los Angeles on June 11th, and then we're going to Chicago, Sacramento, and San Diego on July 16th for the taping of my new special. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets. See you there.